Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar, Going for Gold. I'm Andrew Neilson and I chair the Scotland Members Network for the Chartered Banker Institute, and I also look after media relations at NatWest. I'm really excited about this afternoon's session. I think it's hopefully going to be really interesting, really insightful, but most importantly, I think useful as well to all of us in our careers. There will be the opportunity to ask some questions, so do put questions in the Q&A box. Don't worry, you won't have to appear on camera. Just type your question in and we'll get through as many as we possibly can towards the end. So I'm really excited to be joined by Douglas Fordyce. He's a Team GB Gold Medallist, a Britain's Got Talent winner with Spellbound, and also a pro on BBC primetime Saturday night television show Tumble. And now he's successful as a broker account manager at Lending Crowd. And I think has demonstrated really well how you can bring those transferable skills from sport into the world of finance. So Douglas, if we just get a kick off, if we go back to you're sitting there, age 6, you're watching the gymnastics on TV with your mum and dad, and then you go on to win these gold medals. How did you do it? What was the journey?
Well, yeah, so I was age 6, I was watching the Olympics and I turned to my mum and dad, I was like, I want to do that. And little did I know, actually, at the time, they actually laughed about it, and they sort of said, oh, do you know what, we'll take him along to his local rec gym on a Saturday morning, and when he realizes he's no good, he'll give up. And we just moved down south at this point, and I went along to my first session on Saturday morning, and later on in the afternoon, my mum got a telephone call saying, oh, hi, we're the main gymnastics club, we want him to come and join. And she was like, no, you've got the wrong kid, you've got the wrong kid. And they were like, no, the little Scottish boy. And she was like, right, okay. So I went along literally the following Monday, and that was it. I was hooked and I was in. So I think when I started, it started off, I would train sort of 14 hours a week, and that sort of progressively got more and more. When I reached sort of 15 years old, I moved to an international club up in Bristol. So I used to travel up and down. We were in Devon, I was in Bristol. So I moved up there, started competing internationally. And then I moved to London when I was still 17 to join a bigger club again. I think by that point we were up to training. It was around about 24 hours of training each week. So we would do that sort of before and after, well, to begin with school and then work as well. We all had full-time jobs. So it just kind of went from there. It's been a journey.
Yeah, no, I bet it's been incredible. And I guess like during that time, were there sort of like key lessons that you built up, or I suppose habits that you developed over that time, which have helped you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the biggest ones are just consistency and routine. Obviously, we had scheduled training hours. You turned up to training no matter what. You knew what was expected of you. You had to put the hard work in. So it does sort of give you a resilience. If you were learning a skill, and 9 times out of 10, if you're just starting out learning the skill, you're probably going to fall over, and you just have to get back up, carry on. I think that's definitely helped me, moving into a life beyond gymnastics. And, if you don't succeed first time, get up, try it again, and just keep pushing forwards. It's definitely given me sort of a good mindset. Like hard work pays off. I'm very goal orientated. I've got a lot of drive, so I'll set a goal and I'll put my mind to it and I'll keep going until I achieve it.
I think that resilience point is really good too, isn't it? In terms of like, when you're competing for gold medals at some of these tournaments, which only maybe come about every couple of years, trying to bounce back from that, like how did you do that?
Yeah, it's really difficult. Sort of not every competition goes as planned. I think for me, interestingly enough, the international competitions, I always did really well. It was when I was in front of a home crowd, I used to get really nervous. But I think, experience is everything. Once you've learned to, just keep plodding on, keep putting the work in, you'll get better and better and better.
And I guess kind of like during that time, like competing in big high pressure tournaments, were you thinking about what you were then going to do after gymnastics, or were you very much in the moment of trying to focus on what you were doing at that time?
I think when I was much younger, I probably didn't really think about it too much as I started to progress on. So, especially when you sort of get to the age of around 16, 17, and, you know, are you going to go to university? What are you going to do? Are you going to keep competing? So that definitely came into play then. I am quite stubborn. If I get told that I'm not going to do something, then I will make sure that I do it. I can remember, you know, like I had my goal was always to get a world championship medal. And I had people telling me, no, that will never happen. So on I went and I did. So I got my first world title when I was 16. And I can remember after then, it was around about that time where I was thinking, right, do I go off to university? What am I doing? Because if you're going to carry on competing, you have to commit to it. You've got to choose it over sort of going and doing further education, X, Y, and Z. And I can remember somebody at the time said to me, well, you got one, but it was a fluke. And I was like, right, my mind's made up. That's what I'm going to do. So for me, it was kind of driven through my own stubbornness. I was like, nah, I'm going to go on. I'm going to keep competing. I want to go to senior level and I want to get another world title. And then I think I just sort of, we were very lucky. We were fortunate that obviously Britain's Got Talent came around. It's not what we were expecting to happen. And I found myself in a position where suddenly I was able to turn the sport into a career. I was able to get paid to go and perform. And we just ran with it. We just kept going.
And how did it feel when you won that first gold medal in terms of, and how did you celebrate it as well?
I mean, with my first world title, I was 16. And I think looking back, I don't think I really appreciated the sort of scale of it. Obviously, we were over the moon. We were celebrating, ecstatic. And it's a lot as well, you know, it's whilst I was working effectively with one other individual, I was in a partnership. There's a lot more goes into that. You know, you've got your coaches. It's a big commitment for the families as well. I mean, my mum, bless her, she used to make all of our competition outfits. Like it's a village. So it's not just, you know, when you win these moments, it's not just about you. It's about a much wider team as well.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, definitely. And I suppose now you've made that transition from sport into finance. Like, what attracted you, I suppose, to the role at Lending Crowd, and what attracted you to finance in general?
So to be completely honest, it was COVID that changed everything. And I think I mean, I definitely had a bit of an identity crisis because everything that I did, so I would perform, I would coach, I would, you know, I was working in film and TV, all of that ground to a halt. And I think when it first hit, I definitely, you know, I was flailing. I went all over the place. I worked as a postman during COVID because I was just like, what do I do? I don't know. I don't know like what I have to offer in the world. Like this has been my entire life. What happens from here? Um, and then I sort of stumbled into sales and I loved it. It was, you know, it was competitive. I loved working towards a goal. I was constantly chasing something, and it just suited me, you know, really, really well. But to a point where it was almost too much. I was still working at a level where I used to, as if how I used to train. I was an estate agent. I was working in Chelsea in London, so it's a very affluent area. Most of our clients were international based. So if I had somebody call me at 3 a.m. in the morning, I've got that competitive streak and I would pick up the phone. And it got to a point where I was like, this is too much. I need to focus and go elsewhere. But from that, I had learned that actually I do have a lot of transferable skills. Having a good work ethic, having drive, determination actually works quite well in a corporate environment. So I thought, okay, I don't want to be picking up calls at 3 a.m. in the morning anymore. I want to, find something that's a bit more lenient on your social life. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll try my hand to account management. And my family had been on about moving back home to Scotland for years and years. And Lending Crowd came up, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a go. And here I am.
Yeah, that's great. And in terms of like, you spoke a little bit about the competitiveness element to it. Do you think that's something that you've always had, or do you think that's something that developed through your gymnastics career and then has continued?
I think a bit of both. I think it's definitely a personality trait, but I think working constantly towards, competition, you're always looking to see what your teammates are doing. It sort of instills it even more so. I think, I look at, I'm speaking about my parents again, like I look at my parents, and funny enough, they met through sales. They were very driven. They were very competitive as well. So I do think I've got those personality traits from them, but definitely being in those environments, I think it enhances it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I suppose like, were there any surprises or challenges that you found when you were doing that transition? Like, it's got quite a big change, isn't it, in career?
Yes. I think funny enough, like one of the things is other people's perception of you. I think obviously we live in a world where we like to put people into boxes, and there's certain stereotypes that come from placing people in these boxes. And you kind of think of an athlete as, we've got this image of like an all-American jock that's getting all their grades in school because they're the star football player. And I definitely found moving into a corporate environment, the attitude would sort of be like, oh, you've decided to get a real job. And I think, well, I've been working from the age of 6. Like this is a new step. It's not that I've decided to get a real job, as it were. But when it comes to that, I think, if you're going in and you're feeling like you're on the back foot, the best thing to do is just prove them wrong. And very quickly, if you've got, the capability and you show up, you've got a good attitude, you work hard, and you're contributing well, people will sit up and take notice, and their perception of you will change very, very quickly. So I think it's as much about just having that in the back of your mind, but just putting your best foot forward.
I think that's it. And I guess, did you find you had to put a lot of time in to help try and change people's perception of you?
To an extent, yes, but I think again, going back to when I used to train, you had to be driven, you had to be resilient. So those skills were already there, and I knew that. So I just had to play on them, use what was in my wheelhouse. I think funny enough, another thing is, for me, I had to learn that I'm not competing anymore. And it goes back to that thing of perception, where I would say, oh, well, I'm very driven. Others would be like, oh, he's a stress head. And I think moving from a competitive environment to a working environment, it's taken me a while to adjust and, calm down, rein it in a little bit. Because you don't want to be labeled as a stress head in your office.
It's a fair point. I suppose, though, in terms of like you've shown, I guess, that you've managed to successfully transfer from sport into finance. But what are like the most important skills or qualities you think that you've taken from there into your current role?
Definitely, obviously, you've got the drive and the mindset, but willing to work within a team. When I was competing, I was always part of a team. And communication is a massive factor on that. You've got to be able to trust your teammates, trust your colleagues, be able to voice opinions, work together to make sure that everything's running smoothly and as planned.
Yeah, no, definitely. I can imagine when someone's about to catch you, you've got to trust that they're there and they are going to catch you, aren't you? When before you
Exactly.
fall.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you know there have been, you know, as with any sport, there's been injuries, there's been accidents here and there, but that's why the consistency is key, because, you know, if you're learning a brand new skill, you've got to keep at it. You don't get it first time. It takes hours and hours of preparation, and speaking with each other and saying, well, this doesn't feel right because X, and your partner saying, oh, this doesn't feel right because X. And, you know, it's important to have that communication to be able to actually then master the skill.
Yeah, no, definitely. And just a reminder too, like if anybody would like to, if you'd like to ask a question, then please do put it in the Q&A box, and at the end we'll try and get through as many as we possibly can. So I suppose maybe like onto that mindset part a little bit that you kind of touched on, like having the right mindset in sport is crucial, isn't it? If you're going to win. Do
Yeah.
you find that similar within finance, and how have you taken some of that mindset, and how do you apply that mindset in your current job?
Yeah, I mean, it's again going back to communication, being open with your colleagues. At the end of the day, you're all working towards the same goal, and a team is only ever as strong as its weakest member. And having that level of communication to say, okay, we've got a problem here, let's try and fix that. We've got a solution for that here, so let's implement this, and, you know, just working together to make sure that you're delivering the end result that's required.
I think that makes sense. And I guess, you know, we've performed on Saturday night TV on Britain's Got Talent in front of millions of people and faced off to Simon Cowell. How does that therefore then make, you know, when you're now dealing with the CEO at Lending Crowd, how does that compare?
It doesn't. You'll kill me for saying that. No, I mean, look, I think we learned very, very early on that everybody is human. You know, Simon Cowell is human. He has bad days. Everybody has bad days. So it kind of gave us that perspective of, you know, they're just a person, you know. And I think it's important as well it's all coming back to communication, but having that level that you can speak to each other. I mean, me and Stuart is CEO here at Lending Crowd. We butted heads last week, for example. There was a new process coming into play, and I didn't agree, and he was saying this and I was saying that. But at the end of the day, I think, you know, I want to be able to go home and sleep at night. So it's important to speak up. I'm not going to advise from my perspective to tell someone. I'm not going to be a yes man, basically. And, you know, he took those comments on board, and it's very similar with working with a coach. You know, 90% of the time, me and my coach, we didn't get on. It's a really tricky relationship to have. But this is the thing, you're each working towards the same goal. It's a shared goal. And it was a two-way street as well. I mean, my coach would say the exact same thing against me too. I mean, I'm queen of the death stairs, but yeah, like if looks could kill, I would be an Avenger. But it's just about stepping back and realizing, look, we are both working towards the same goal. I'll take on board your perspective, you take on board my perspective. And it comes down to being able to step back as well and respect experience. You know, people like Simon Cowell and Stuart as well, they didn't build multi-million companies based off of nothing alone. Like, they know what they're talking about. So whilst it's really important to have the relationship that you can say, I don't agree with you, at the end of the day, you need to be able to take a step back and think, well, actually, I'm not as experienced, so I'm going to take their lead on it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I guess that kind of comes to that whole idea around pressure as well. It's a very pressurized environment, you know, performing on Saturday night TV or competing at major competitions. Like, what is your advice then to sort of stay calm and focused in those types of situations?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think consistency is key. I try and just break my day down. I've got a good routine. I like to go to the gym in the morning. I will try and go for a walk over lunch, sort of release sort of tension, as it were. Sleep is very important for me as well. I try to get up at the same time every morning to make sure that my body's in rhythm. And it's just taking really little steps to sort of like help manage and set yourself up for a productive day. Another thing would be to, try to not take things too personally. Again, like going back to a coaching situation, sometimes my coach would be screaming at me and I think, well, they're having a bad day, or, they're only wanting what's best for me. So it's sort of trying to not take things overly personal. You don't know what other people have got going on in their lives. And again, you're always striving towards the same goal. That being said, as well, there's situations that I do think you've got to learn to know when to remove yourself or walk away. I mean, a prime example sort of here, I mean, look at Simone Biles in the 2020 Olympics. She'd had enough. She couldn't do it. She got in her head, and she left the competition. And, the entire world came down on her. But that's what was right for her. She knew in that moment, and her coaches, her team knew in that moment, like, we need to get her out of here. We need to take a step back and reset. And then she's come back in 2024. She's now the most decorated gymnast in history. She's one of the most decorated athletes of all time. I think people get worried about failure and, sort of thinking, oh, well, if I walk away, I'm going to look like I've given up. I'm going to look like I failed. But every single step is just another step closer towards your end goal. So if you need to, take a step back and, reset and do that, then do it.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great example, isn't it? And I suppose it comes back to that whole thing around motivation. Like, how do you become or keep motivated? And is it sometimes actually taking that step back to then go forward?
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, for me, it's just about setting little routines. Going to the gym in the morning, you get a sense of accomplishment. Making your bed is so simple, just tiny little things like go to the gym in the morning, make your bed, but do what feels right for you. Everyone's different. There's no one size fits all. All you can do is control your controllables. When we were competing, we tried not to focus on what our competitors were doing because we can't control that. We don't know what they're doing. We don't know what they're going to do on the day. We don't know, X, Y, Z. We can only control the effort that we're putting in and the way we're working and the way we're training. So everything else is just noise. So long as you can kind of try and stay true to your own core values, that's all there really is.
And do you think actually focusing on what you can control kind of takes the pressure and stress off a little bit too?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even coming into corporate, I can't control what a client wants. I can't control if there is a budget announcement. These are things that are outside of my control. So all I can do is come in with the right mindset, the right attitude, and focus on what I can deliver. And I think by removing all of that external noise, it kind of gives yourself a little bit of grace in that, as long as I've shown up, I'm given my utmost. That's all you can do. That's all that you can put forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really good message, isn't it? So no, here, thanks, Douglas, so much for that. I can see we've got a couple of questions coming in the chat box. So if anybody does have any more questions, do put them in the chat box and we'll try and get through as many as we can. I can see the first one is from David Gorman. So he's asked, when you were competing, how did you deal with injuries and other setbacks, especially around big competitions?
Yes. So, I mean, yeah, especially in gymnastics, there's a lot of injuries. I've actually had 4 surgeries on my wrist. So it doesn't bend back. Um, I mean, with this one in particular, we knew what was wrong with it about a year leading up to the World Championships. I think it was a different era back then as well. So this would have been back in 2009, 2010. And I just carried on. We just kept plodding along. We kept going. Like it wasn't an option to take time off. Um, in hindsight, it's left me with a fused wrist, and it probably wasn't the best decision. But I think, particularly in gymnastics, your competitive career is very short. Um, but you know, nowadays, like if I go to the gym and I've got an injury, I'm much more aware, and I try to take a bit more of a sensible approach. Um, if you've injured your wrist, well, you can still train your legs. If you've injured your knee, well, you could still train your upper body. There's things that you can do to work around. So yeah, I think it's just important just because you've got an injury, it doesn't mean that's it, you're out. There's other areas that you can focus on. And I guess you can kind of apply that to all sorts, really.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So, see, there's another question here as well from Helen. So, it's talking about, so you've now moved into finance. So, how important do you think it is for people who maybe didn't have that background to get qualifications like, chartered banker qualifications?
Oh, I mean, I think it sort of goes back to as well the perception of others. When I was first moving into a corporate environment, and people sort of think, "Oh God, here comes another athlete. Like, what's going on?" And whilst I've built up the mindset to, if I'm going to do something, I'll set my mind to it and I will achieve it. Having qualifications such as chartered banker, it gives you it not only gives yourself some credibility, but it puts you in the frame of mind to sort of say, well, there you go, I've got this. And having the resources that are available, it's brilliant. It just expands, and I think it's really important for us to continue learning. You're never going to know anything. Like nobody is a 100% expert in absolutely everything. There's always going to be new skills to be learned, new information to be absorbed. So I think it's great. I think it's brilliant to be able to absorb yourself in it and open yourself up to new experiences.
I think it's getting good to have something like the Chartered Banker Institute where you have those qualifications and you can see what's available and can develop a plan, I suppose, as to what you want to then set out to do.
Exactly, and especially when when I was first starting out, and I was sort of like, okay, I like the sector, I like being here, but I'm not 100% certain on necessarily where I want to take my career, like what path I want to go down. By opening yourself up to the wealth of information that's there, you can sort of think, okay, well, actually, this interests me. I'm maybe going to pursue X. That interests me. I'm going to find out more about this. So yeah, it's really useful.
Yeah, definitely. Do keep sending your questions in as well. I've got a few others coming through now. So got one from Kirsten on what kind of diet and lifestyle did you have to follow as a professional athlete? And have you taken any lessons away from that in terms of maintaining your well-being in the financial services role?
Yes. So I mean, when when I was competing, I was still, at like 20s and teens. So I was very lucky that my metabolism was through the roof then. So funny enough, when we were training and competing, I was constantly eating. I was eating and eating and eating. And for me, I was always I was quite small. So it was literally about getting in as many calories as I possibly could to try and build myself up. I think moving from competing into a performance industry, it was very different. I was on camera a lot, often not wearing very many clothes. So I actually, it took the mindset of, I've had a coach in gymnastics. I'm not certain on how to maintain my diet and what I should be doing. So I invested in a personal trainer who taught me, how to lift weights properly in the gym, what diet I should be following. And now that I've moved away from that, I think, so I'm a big fan of intermittent fasting, mainly because it's really simple. It's really easy to work around your day-to-day. So I mean, most people are quite familiar with it now. It's quite a sort of hot topic, but so it's effectively 16-8. So you'll only eat for 8 hours of the day. And, I find it really simple. I basically just don't have breakfast. And from lunchtime onwards, I still like to monitor what I'm eating and make sure that, I'm fueling my body correctly, that you've only got one body. So treat it with respect. But also, I think it's sort of the attitude of how I had to learn to not be quite as a stress head. Your social life and your friends and your family, like that's important as well. That's just as important for your mental health. So if you sort of fall off your diet, it's not the end of the world. One of my things is, if you fall off, get up and get back on straight away. Like a lot of people say, "Oh, I've fallen off the wagon and it's a Wednesday. I'm gonna not do anything until Monday now." I think I don't think it's always the best way to look at it. Like just learn to accept. It's fine. I I'll get back up. I'll start again tomorrow and sort of go from there.
I think that's a really good attitude, isn't it? We've got one from Christy too, actually asking about, was there like one defining moment, I suppose, in your gymnastics career that's maybe kind of shaped who you are now and then what you went on to do in the future?
I think it would, yeah, definitely my second world title. That was because we were competing at senior level. We were the underdogs. We, like you were saying earlier, these competitions, they would either come around every 2 years or every 4 years. So that's a long period that you're just focusing on that one goal. During the competition cycle, it was us, Ukraine, and Russia. We were the top three every time. And we were the newer partnership as well. The other two countries had a lot more experience than us. We just kept pulling away, and I think maybe being the underdog almost helped us a little bit because we couldn't focus on what they were doing because we already knew they were amazing. So it was just about leading up to that point and preparing and making sure that we could do the absolute best that we could. And it paid off. And I can remember the results coming in on the scoreboards, and it was a moment.
Yeah, no, I bet. Got one more. Here we go from Craig's asked, are there any skills which you learned during your competing days that you're able to then utilize in your corporate career today as well?
I think, yeah, I mean, especially when you're competing, obviously, like there's a lot of nerves and you need to shake it out. You got to breathe. I know it doesn't sound like big things, but it's just little techniques that you can use to keep yourself calm, keep yourself focused, try and, ground yourself again. So, get up and walk away from your desk, let yourself move, like take some deep breaths. It's all real basic stuff that we all know how to do, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we do it. So yeah, it's just about consistency and following like little strategies that work for you and keeping consistent. Do it throughout the day. Don't just think, oh, well, I've done that. Done. That's it. Ticked off. Like use these coping strategies throughout the entire day to try and keep you on track.
And I suppose, one of the other questions which sort of come through was on resilience. And are there sort of things or steps which you've taken to make yourself more resilient in your current role?
I mean, I think, yeah, going back again about not taking things too personally and only controlling your controllables. So long as you're showing up with the right mindset, that's all anybody can ask of you. Don't get me wrong, like you're always going to have a bad day where it's going to happen, but it's important to try and not let that define the rest of your week, the rest of your career. Yeah, you've had a bad day, it happens. Go and do something you enjoy. Go and take your mind off it, and tomorrow's a fresh start. Get up and get back on the horse, off you go again.
Absolutely. We've had a question actually, and I think we've probably got time maybe for one more if anybody did want to send any more in, but we've had another question here. This might be the final one, and was from Kirsten. It's on tumble actually, and also your professional partner. So how did it compare to competing with someone who wasn't a professional on tumble to then competing, as a professional, because you're both professional athletes when you're competing in the World Championships?
So yeah, it was interesting. So I was paired with Amel from the Sugar Babes. And I mean, I was very lucky. Amel was fantastic. She, again, I mean, they try and pair you up with people that they think is going to fit your personality. And Amel was also very competitive, also very driven. And I think I had a little bit of not anxiety, but maybe like nerves going into it, thinking, oh, what's this celebrity going to be like? Are they going to listen? Are they going to? But again, it comes back to the thing is it's just another person. And actually, she was feeling nervous. She was feeling out of her depth. She actually wanted guidance from me. And then when it went on to doing things like interviews and being on TV, suddenly she was then the expert. So then I was then able to lean on her. And it's just about, keeping the communication open. We were really honest with each other. If she wasn't feeling right about something, she'd let me know. We'd work on a solution. We'd try and figure it out. So yeah, it was an amazing experience. It was really good.
And I guess quite nice too when you can both kind of help each other in quite different ways, actually.
Exactly. And like I was saying earlier, you're never going to be an expert in absolutely everything, but you work as part of a team. So use each other. Everybody's got a different set of skills. Everybody's got things that they're better at, things that they need to work on, but collaboratively, you'll be able to get the right result.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. No, Douglas, here, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us this afternoon. I think it's been really good. And thank you to everyone for joining us as well. I think it's been a really good session. I'd like to also thank Christy at the Chartered Banking Institute for helping to organise today, and to Helen as well for helping organise the event. It's been really good. I suppose kind of like some of the things which I picked up, there was kind of three things I think which came across really well were around kind of like, easy habits to sort of get into, are building that discipline through those kind of small and consistent habits, which I think you spoke about quite a bit. And then also, that kind of focus as well when you're under pressure, and kind of breaking those challenges perhaps into kind of smaller manageable steps. And I suppose most importantly, being properly prepared for them. And then the final one is probably around goal setting as well, and kind of setting out those actionable steps so you kind of know where it is you're going and how you're going to get there. But also really important to celebrate success. And I guess in the same way that you did when you won gold medals, it's actually making sure when you achieve what you're setting out to do that you're celebrating it as well along the way.
Definitely, so. Yeah.
Well, it's been really good. So thank you again, and thanks to everyone for joining us. And please do stay in touch and follow us on LinkedIn. You can follow this Chartered Banking Institute and the Scotland Members Network. We should have some really good events in the new year, so hopefully we'll see you at them. Have a good afternoon, and thanks again.